All right, guys, thanks. Welcome into this live stream. I usually go live on Fridays during the season, but there's something happening tomorrow. No, I can't put my finger on it. I can't remember what it is. I don't know, some baseball game or something. So I didn't think it would do anyone any good if I did anything tomorrow during Game 5 of the ALDS with the Mariners trying to close things out against the Tigers and move on to the ALCS against the Blue Jays. But this is a football show, not a baseball show. Although, you know, within the course of an ever-evolving conversation throughout the next hour, we could talk some baseball if you want to. But mostly I want to focus on this game on Sunday against the Jacksonville Jaguars. One of those games that at the beginning of the season, when you look at the schedule, you think, okay, that's probably a winnable game. I had it as a win when I predicted how the season would go when the schedule first came out. But then, as things do in football and life and professional sports, things change. And right now, the Jaguars are that team. They're young. They've made some changes. Things are working. They're 4-1. They're coming off a huge win. They're feeling good about themselves. And so all of a sudden, everyone thinks they're invincible. They're the it team. Meanwhile, the Seahawks coming off a disappointing performance, especially on defense, and that's got everybody worried. How do the two teams match up? How do you guys feel about the game? What are some questions you have for me? And then I'll give you some ideas of how I think it's going to go. Coming up next on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
If you don't already subscribe to the channel, if you would please, that would be fantastic. The best things you can do for any YouTube creator is like their videos, share them, and subscribe. That lets YouTube know that, hey, this is some pretty good stuff, and it gives them an idea of who to push that video out to as well. Also, if you want to help support me as a full-time content creator, this QR code right up here, you can scan it, buy me a coffee or a beer if you're so inclined. All the other ways you can support me and my other platforms listed down below. And look out for some big announcements between now and the bye week. We're going to make some big changes over on Patreon, make that a much bigger part of what Seahawks Forever is and what I do, and a chance for you as viewers and listeners to get more involved in some of the selection process when it comes to topics and engage more and have some fun. So check that out if you have a chance as well. So this is where the Seahawks currently stand in the NFC West. Well, we can't say it's the best division in football anymore, because up until last week, it was the only division that didn't have a team with a losing record. But thanks to the Cardinals and their epic Keystone Cops meltdown against the Titans, what a game that was. They fall to 2-3. And so, you know, the 49ers out in front now with that huge win on Thursday night really shifted the balance of power in the division. They're now at 4-1, and their schedule's looking really, really favorable. They play the Bucs this week in Tampa. That's not going to be easy, but even if they lose that game, when you start to look at their schedule, and we can go over that here in a little bit if you'd like, it gets a little scary because they especially if they get some of their guys back, like their schedule's really favorable. Seahawks at 3-2, of course, so are the Rams, and then there sit the Cardinals at 2-3. But there are only 3 divisions in football that have where their teams combined for 11 wins. The NFC West still one of those. Point differential still looks really good, though, thanks to that Week 3 win over the Saints. Seahawks at plus 41. The Rams stand pat at plus 16. Niners at plus 8. And the Cardinals at plus 7. What I thought I would do here today is just kind of, I jotted some things down. So I didn't make as many pretty graphics as I normally do. These are my notes. I don't know if those even look readable to you. Sometimes they don't, even to me, unless I get to them quick enough. In my career as a server, you should have seen, I could never, sometimes you get busy, you get in the weeds, as they call it, and you have to enter 2 or 3 orders at a time, which is a big no-no, but sometimes you can't help it. And so if somebody else has a minute, you'd hand them your little sheet and or your notebook, and for them to enter your order for you. Yeah, I could never do that. Nobody could ever read my notes. But I did create a graphic, kind of comparing some key team metrics, and then kind of looking at the quarterbacks a little bit. and how they match up in some key areas. And then I'm keeping my eye on Twitter. It's usually about 7:00 Eastern time, between 7 and 8 when the Seahawks injury report comes out. And so hopefully we'll get a clearer picture today of DeMarcus Lawrence, perhaps Devin Witherspoon. Sounds like those guys were going to go till the end of the week, as Mike Macdonald said, but maybe we'll hear something about Reek Woolen and some of the other guys that were banged up. Ernest Jones didn't practice yesterday with a shoulder. I don't expect that to keep him out this week. He finished the game okay on Sunday. Sometimes those are just nagging things and you want to rest your veterans, right? But yeah, we'll just keep our fingers crossed on that. But if that does come up, then we'll talk about it. And also today, the Seahawks made another roster move, not elevating, but signing Brandon Peely to the 53-man roster. A move that doesn't come as a surprise. They used up his third practice squad elevation last week, and they need some reinforcements on the defensive line. Interesting that he ends up winning the battle essentially against Quinton Bohanna. Between the two nose tackles, but makes sense to me. He's a more athletic guy, and I think he's flashed a little bit more than Bohanna. Hey, you guys, sometimes it just happens this way, but we have a special surprise guest joining us now. Bryce Coutts of the Hawks Eye. How you doing, buddy?
Good, man. How are you, Dan?
Good. I know you got to go in a little bit, right?
Yeah, just a bit. I've got a show with Brandon King, color commentating.
Oh, you're going to do the Thursday night game tonight?
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I might have to tune in for that. Glad I moved this up though. It was going to go an hour later, and then I found out that my partner is not working tonight, so I thought I'd free myself up and also enjoy that game and see it's Eagles, right? So see how that goes. But I saw you sitting in there and thought I'd send you the link. And so let's just get to some of these comments and questions to start off with before I get into some of the metrics. First of all, there you were. So, kudos to you. Let's do a little bit of this action here. First of all, it's just like, with, I guess, what do we got? 3 days left until Sunday. Like, how do you feel about this game just generally?
Well, actually, hold on, Dan. I think I'm echoing.
Oh, thank you. Wasn't planning on having. It should be fine. Got to turn that echo cancellation on. Now you should be good. Sorry, guys.
There we go. Yeah, no, I just realized. I just looked in the chat and saw it. I was like, oh, I don't want to echo. In regards to this game, Dan, I think this is a really crucial game to decide Seattle's season. And the reason I say that is they've got to find a way to deal with injuries on defense. They've got to find a way this can't be a team where, yeah, it works great when we've got everybody, and then when we lose people, we just completely fall apart. I'm not worried about the offense. I think the offense is actually starting to turn that corner. The run game's starting to come alive. The pass game, as we've seen, is already alive. And I think in some respects, from what we even saw at training camp, a little bit different than what maybe we were expecting. And so when I look at this game, I think Seattle has every opportunity to win this game. I just hope that Mike Macdonald can get the ducks in a row when it comes to defense and, have a better game plan. Because you're going up against Liam Cohen. He's the guy that ran a similar system what the Bucs ran. He's the guy that actually theoretically designed the Bucs system in Baker and how they play now in Tampa. And Lawrence has not looked great, but he hasn't looked bad. And it's going to be interesting. I think it'll be a close game. I think it'll come down to, can Seattle get a couple takeaways?
Let me ask you, we're going to talk about takeaways for sure, but let me ask you about the quarterbacks while I've got you here before you have to go, because of course you are a quarterback guy, right? If you guys don't know that, runs a quarterback academy, coaches offense. So just generally, before I get into some numbers here, what are your thoughts on Trevor Lawrence as a quarterback and on his progression now in year 6?
Yeah, I guess it would be year 6 for now. For me, I think Trevor Lawrence was massively overhyped coming out in his draft class. I think people looked at him and went, "Oh, he's so
generational talent."
Exactly, that was the term. He's the next Andrew Luck, was what you heard people saying going into that draft class. And Yeah, you can look that way when you're playing at Clemson at that time in that era with Dabo and, the whole, group that they had going on there. Deshaun Watson looked really good there. And he was a byproduct, I think. Like, yeah, he has talent. I'm not going to say he's a talentless quarterback. That's not what I'm saying. But to be the guy that they were talking about, he's never lived up to that hype. And so for me, like, I think he gives me Alex Smith vibes a bit. He gives me just like, hey, he's a starting caliber quarterback that you overdrafted. And I think Sam Darnold's a better quarterback than Trevor Lawrence. And I don't think it's much of a discussion. I think, Trevor Lawrence to me will never live up to his draft billing. He'll never live up to being a number one pick and a generational talent that was thrown around with him.
Well, and what's interesting when you look back too is that all of that hype came from his freshman season. Like he didn't play as well as a sophomore and a junior. He just didn't.
No.
But that reputation was there, and you fall in love with the traits. He's tall and he's fast. And he's got a big arm and all that. But I haven't seen him put it all together. I made a kind of a comparison today on the NFC West mixtape that I've to Kyler Murray, and not that they're the same player at all. And I feel better about Lawrence and his ability to someday get close to his ceiling than I did Kyler, but that the sum of the parts just never kind of came together, right? The traits just never translated into a really effective quarterback. And I think Sam Darnold's a really great sort of juxtaposition to compare him to, that the traits were always there. The physical ability was always there, but he looked like a mess early in his career, but he figured out a way to put it together. And when it clicked, now it looks like the E word's being thrown around, right? The elite word is being thrown around. You look back at 23 of the last 25 games Sam Darnold's played, and he's an elite quarterback. He put it all together. That could still happen for Lawrence. He's still young. And he's with a guy that's developed quarterbacks before. Like, he played a huge role in the Baker Mayfield that shredded us on Sunday, unfortunately.
He did.
But yet, he's only completing 60% of his passes. He's thrown 5 interceptions so far. Now, I will give him this. He is, of all the quarterbacks in the NFL that have played that have at least 100 dropbacks, but his receivers are number one in the league in drops, almost a 12% drop percentage. So he's not getting help there, despite the fact that his offensive line is surprisingly, like, if you had asked me, like, who are the best offensive lines in football, I wouldn't have said, Jacksonville probably, but they're way up there in most of their rankings. And I'll show you some of those in a minute. But Darnold's third in passer rating, Lawrence is 29. Darnold's second in QBR, Lawrence is 21st. I mean, we're down in like the range of guys that are barely starter quality. So that hasn't really clicked yet. Jacksonville's found a way to win these games, but it's not because of Trevor Lawrence, which actually, if you're a Jaguars fan, you're probably feeling pretty good about, because you might feel like if it does click, well, now we have a team that could really challenge in the playoffs in the AFC.
Yeah. The thing for me with the clicking factor is, what more do you need from him to click? Like, that's my biggest, my biggest thing with Trevor Lawrence is, again, like, when you look at for example, when you look at the Sam Darnold situation, or even the Baker Mayfield situation, look at the organizations they went to. And I know people will go, well, the Jags were in the same kind of category at that time. Yeah, but then the Jags turned around and added a lot of good quality pieces around said players. And they brought in a Doug Peterson, who we knew can develop and coach quarterbacks really well for that time period while he was in Jacksonville. Yes, the Urban Meyer was a nightmare scenario. I think we all can admit to that one. But Trevor Lawrence has not had a lack of talent around him. And that's when I look at guys like Baker and I look at Sam and we go, yeah, and they've been able to put it together now. Well, if you look at their first 2 initial stops, except for the 1 year with Baker there in Cleveland where he had Odell and Landry, he did get them into the playoffs or close. Sam had nothing, right? So he was in New York with next to nothing and 21 years old. And I look at Trevor Lawrence and I kind of just go, meh. Like, yeah, they're not winning games because of Trevor Lawrence. Well, your first round pick in year 6 should be part of the reason you're winning games, and where you take him and the terms that were thrown around with him, Dan, like generation, like you said earlier. I just look at, like, nothing about Trevor Lawrence frightens me in this game. What frightens me is Liam Cohen's play design and getting him to get, easy throws, and our injuries causing problems. I'm more afraid of what is Mike Macdonald going to do differently this week that he didn't do last week. That's what I have more of a fear. I don't look at the Jaguars and go, oh, they're such a scary team. Like Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas and those guys, yeah, they're really good players.
Yeah.
But I don't look at them in the same light that I look at, say, like a Mike Evans if he had played, or, some of the other guys that we played against. So with the Jags team, I think it'll be a close game because we're banged up. If we were fully healthy, I don't know if this is a close game. I think it might be a 31-17 game, kind of like what we saw in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it's interesting. I touched on it earlier, but sometimes teams get hyped up, and it's because they win, obviously, right? But it's how they're winning, and they're winning by taking the ball away. They lead the NFL in turnovers and turnover margin. They're +8 right now. They have more takeaways this year so far than they had all of last year, and that allows you to win games. That allows you to beat teams that maybe you shouldn't beat. That's how they won the game on Monday against a Chiefs team that looked like they had control of that game. They're not beating teams with their offense, even though their rushing offense has been pretty good. ETN is 4th in the league in running on rushing yards. But the thing when you talk about what's the click, what's the click we're waiting for, the thing that I think is elevated Sam Darnold to another level, and we'll use him as an example again because I think the trajectory could be similar, is what clicked for him is command, right? I liken it to a pitcher that's got stuff. He throws 100 miles an hour and he's got a nasty breaking stuff, but he has no command. He can't control it. He doesn't know where it's going. And I don't mean that specifically with how he throws the football. He can throw the football accurately. But what has made Sam so good this year, we started to see it a little bit last year in Minnesota, but it's even better this year, is just how quick he makes decisions, how decisive he is with the football, and then how accurate he is with the football and ripping it into tight windows. I never see those throws from Lawrence. When he makes big plays, when he has 300-yard passing games and 3 or 4 TDs, it's because guys, like you said, are schemed open. They're big plays where he just hangs it up for a 50-50 ball and a guy makes a play. He doesn't scare me the way Matthew Stafford does, where he's just going to just at surgical down the field, down the middle of the field, and just ripping it into guys that are in, even if they're covered. He's not going to beat you that way. So that part. Now, I don't mean to dismiss him, right? Because it's kind of everything around him. That team is certainly capable of putting a good offensive performance together, but it does. I agree with what you said at the very top. It does really. This is a huge test for Mike Macdonald. And maybe the biggest one he's had since he's been the head coach, where there's the most pressure and the most eyeballs on him. What was that? And ironically, Todd Bowles did the same thing on Sunday. He's supposedly one of the best defensive play callers in this league, and he gave up 35 points on Sunday too. But because they won the game, no one's worried about it, right?
Well, exactly.
Mike needs to have an answer, because if they lose this game, like you said, the 49ers, even if they lose to the Bucs on Sunday, which I think they will, but who knows? They're so well coached this year that if they pull that off, they're running away with the division, perhaps. Because if you look at their schedule, there's not a lot of toughness left on that for the next 7 or 8 weeks after the Bucs game. So the Seahawks have to win this game to keep pace.
They really do. And when I look at the Jaguars schedule here, Dan, their first game, they played Carolina. Carolina's been awful this year. They play Cincinnati. They lose that game, but Cincinnati loses Joe Burrow in that game. They're playing Jake Browning for the back half, and Lawrence throws a bad ball that him and Cohen are having their sideline little spat about.
Yeah, you said that.
Yeah, then they play Houston. Houston offensively has been horrible this year. CJ Stroud looks like a shell of what the rookie version we saw. Yeah, they've got a good defense. They win that game 17-10. They beat San Francisco, which I think you and me can agree, when Seattle's healthy, Seattle is a better opponent than San Francisco is.
Oh, and wasn't that the game that Brock came back and tried to play, and he
tried to play and he wasn't really Brock, and yeah, that was that game. And then they beat Kansas City by 3 points. They have not really. The only game I look at where I go, yeah, they dominated and beat somebody, was Carolina week 1, 26-10. Everything else was a touchdown or less. So we're talking. They lose 31-27 to Cincinnati. They win 17-10 over Houston. They win 26-21 over San Francisco, and they win 31-28 over Kansas City. They haven't had a dominant performance with the Jacksonville team where I'm going like, yeah, like that's a statement win. Like even this Kansas City game, Kansas City isn't Kansas City. We've seen that this year. They're trying to still put on the facade that they're a Super Bowl level team when they're not. I don't look at them and I go, yeah, like if you're telling me like, okay, they went in and they beat, Buffalo, and they went in and they beat, the Ravens before all their injuries, then I'm a little bit more like, okay, like, yeah, these guys could be, to me, they feel somewhat like the 49ers do. If you look at who the 49ers have beaten and stuff, you're kind of sitting there going, okay, well, have they really beaten anybody of merit besides us week one?
Yeah.
You kind of lit there and you kind of hold that and you hold that against the team. So if they can come out and beat Seattle, like the rest of, and it's Los Angeles, like those are not two easy outs. And then they come back to Vegas, then they come back to Houston, and they play the Chargers. Like they have a pretty, like just looking at the Jag schedules to give you a sense here, Dan, it's Vegas after the Rams and Seahawks. It's Vegas, Houston, Chargers, Cardinals, Tennessee, Colts again, which would be their biggest, like the Colts are their biggest run in that division. They don't play them until week 14 and week 17.
Yeah.
Other than that, they're not playing anybody of real merit.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you, but I don't want to, like, I fell into that trap last week, right? Like looking at Tampa Bay's wins coming in were against teams that were 1-8 the first 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to be, the crowd's going to be feeling it. And they start to believe in this team again. But I think another factor that I'm not sure is getting talked about enough is this could be a little bit of not a trap game, because who do they have next week? They don't have a big rival.
Rams.
Right. That's an important game, but it's not a rival. If they were playing the Colts the next week, maybe you could call it a classic trap game, but it could be. And I'm sure that Liam Cohen is talking about it this week, but sometimes the more you focus on it, as a coach, it puts it more in people's psyches. Huge letdown. That is one of the biggest wins they had in a long time on Monday on a national stage against the perennial powerhouse of the last 5, 6, 7 years in the NFL, an AFC team that you aspire to be like, and you come back to beat them in dramatic fashion on Monday. That is a massive, massive emotional high to then have to get up again a week later on a short week and play a pissed off team. Now, we've seen a couple examples of how Mike Macdonald teams respond to bad performances. We saw them play violently week 2 against Pittsburgh, and it took a little while to get going, but then they absolutely took that team to the woodshed in the second half. They were a pissed off team. I suspect a similar performance this week. As far as effort goes, it's just, who's going to be on the field and how's he going to use them, and what are we going to see differently from that defense? Because there are some weapons you have to respect there. I'm a fantasy manager of Brian Thomas Jr., and he's been a huge letdown this year. But I certainly don't want to go into the game thinking, well, he's not giving him anything this year, because he's super talented and he's capable of going 8 for 130 and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, and the thing for me when I look at it is Seattle's got to find a way to manifest pressure against Lawrence. It can't be. Oh,
there you go. Sorry, I was just switching over to this. I wanted to
all good. And that's the thing for me. Like, can Mike Macdonald scheme up some, simulated pressures and do some other things that he likes? Because depending on who's in and who's out, it's going to be really, really interesting to see what Mike does. Because to your point, Dan, they did play pissed off, but they also were healthy. They were pretty healthy in that game versus the Pittsburgh Steelers relative to where they are right now. Like, I think if you look at that injury report and you say, okay, you can have guys that are legitimately going to play or have an opportunity to play. For me, the 2 guys I want to see on there is Tank and Julian Love playing. Give Witherspoon another week. I think you can get away with that. If it's Job and Shaq Griffin at corners this week, I'm okay with that.
It sounds like Reek's going to be able to go. I mean, to be able to go through the walkthrough yesterday and the concussion protocol is a pretty positive sign. I think he's going to play on Sunday.
I agree. So, like, your corner situation might give Devin another week. Fine. You can do things with, Eamon Worry coming back for his second, go around. But if you can get Tank and you can get Julian Love back, I think those 2 are the biggest 2 out of the group. Obviously Brandon Peely got activated today, which I kind of figured was going to happen because he's been playing really good on that interior side of things. But those are the two guys I look at and go, if I see on Sunday that Julian Love's active and he's good to go and Tank Lawrence, I feel a lot more confident going into that game of dealing with them and creating pressure on Lawrence with those guys than I do, without them.
Put a couple of metrics up here just to kind of play to your point. So you look at, the Seahawks, even with that performance Sunday where they barely got any pressure on Baker, still fourth in next gen stats, pass rush win rate as a unit. But going up, if you look down and over in Jacksonville's column, their pass block win rate, they're third in the league as being one of the best offensive lines at holding off pressure. And then the Seahawks at number 5 still in run stop win rate, where Jacksonville is number 2 in the league in run block win rate. And again, Trevor Etienne is 5th in the league in rushing yardage. So that'll be, nobody's been able to run on Seattle this year. This will be a really big test for them to see if they can do that. And then you kind of look at the rest of the stuff. But here you flip that around, and Jacksonville hasn't been getting a lot of pressure on teams. 18th in pass rush win rate and 25th in run stop win rate. We could have another shootout on our hands here a little bit if that defense doesn't respond. And then some of the PFF ranks, they've got Seattle 10th overall defensively, Jacksonville 6th. Their coverage grade is they've got Jacksonville number 1 in the league, but there's something I want to talk to you about here in a second. And the Seahawks 20th in coverage. Run defense, Seahawks 6th, Jacksonville 13th. And then you just kind of look down the board there. But there was a question right off the bat, and that's the one I want to hit here from Adam Baum. Hey, Dan, what's more crucial for the Seahawks Sunday, D-line pressure or better secondary play? We've heard Mike Macdonald talk all season about how connected it has to be, right? But we saw what happened when both units get banged up. So it's hard to pinpoint where the problems were on Sunday, but I know you've watched the tape quite a bit. How would you answer this question?
I think it's going to come down to the pressure. You have to get pressure because what pressure does is it speeds everything up for a quarterback. So now you don't stay on your progression as long. You don't see the windows as clear, and you almost over anticipate spots to throw the ball, because you just don't have the time to actually see that drop necessarily fully develop. Like, one thing that they do really well of is in Seattle, and Mike Macdonald and Carl Scott and Leslie Frazier teach it really well, is the spot dropping. They do a phenomenal job teaching spot drops. And so if I'm a quarterback and I'm looking at spot dropping, I'm trying to anticipate where he's going to end up based off of certain cues and keys that the defense has. But if my clock is sped up because the pocket's collapsing and they're getting pressure and I even have to move, I lose visual representation downfield of where everybody is. And now I'm kind of guessing, okay, well, last I saw him was over here. I'm anticipating where my window is with my route and what my guy is doing. This is where I'm putting the ball. And that's where you see things like, some of Kobe Bryant's interceptions where quarterbacks overshoot the window, or, you see Ernest Jones, drop into a perfect spot to get an interception because they're in that area and the ball gets popped up because there's 3 Seahawks around it. That's what wasn't happening. Now, the other thing D-line pressure does that helps in the back end is it allows your linebackers to get to their drops quicker. And one thing that wasn't happening in the game against the Buccaneers is because we weren't getting pressure with the D-line, our linebacker drops were massively exposed. Like, Tampa Bay was hitting every in-breaker, and you can bet all the money you want on the house that Liam Cohen saw that and goes, if we can block up, we have these deep in-breaking routes at 12 to 15 yards down the field we can take advantage of with Seattle. And he's going to be banking on trying to protect Lawrence to get those in-breaks to Thomas, to Travis Hunter, or whoever else is, playing receiver there. So I would say your bigger key and more crucial is, can the D-line get pressure on Lawrence and speed up his internal clock?
What do you think Macdonald's going to do? Because he's talked a lot this week, and he talked after the game about how, hey, that was on me. I didn't have him prepared, and I didn't make the right calls. What adjustments do you expect to see from him and how he calls the game on Sunday?
I think you'll see Nick Eamon-Wari way more involved in pressures and coming off and dropping, whether it's like a Leo or it's dropping, even Chenna off and bringing Nick off the edge, or even stunts. I think you'll see more stunts. Like, The thing that was weird with Seattle, once Derek Hall went out in that game, they got so vanilla and so basic. They weren't doing a lot of things. And you could see certain communicational issues. Like there was one play where two linebackers blitz the same gap and literally run into each other. And it's like, that's not normal for a Mike Macdonald defense, for two guys to. And that also, I think, speaks to the lack of pressure usage and blitzing that Seattle does, that it wasn't something they were comfortable with. Now we have to bring pressure. Now we have to go deep into our playbook to kind of bring some things out that we haven't necessarily used to run a lot of, because we haven't had to. We haven't had to bring pressure. We haven't had to bring 5 or 6 to get pressure on the quarterback. So I think that's something he's probably worked on this week, is like, until we're fully healthy, I'm going to have to dial up the blitz percentage. And I wouldn't be surprised unless Seattle makes a trade for an edge, or they are waiting till Derek Hall gets healthy, and all, like, you're going to see that pressure rate, I think, go up to help on the back end, so those guys aren't stuck in a situation where they're covering forever.
They've actually blitzed less in the last couple of weeks. After the first 3 weeks, they were 28th in the league in blitz percentage, and now they're down to 30th. The Emin-Worry thing's interesting. Early in OTAs and the start of training camp, I know you had Greg Bell on your show, so did I, and he talked about how he actually at times was playing quite a bit of weak side linebacker in nickel packages. Is that kind of what you're talking about, that we might see some of that? I mean, you talked about having him at the line of scrimmage and pressuring, but if linebacker drops are an issue, having a guy with a safety background maybe trying to help out there might make some sense.
I think you'll see a lot more of the 4-2-5 look they play, which is their base defense, but I think you'll see it where Nick potentially is one of those two linebackers. And you may see Ty Okada if he's playing, because Julian's not, but say Julian does play and you got Kobe, you may see situations where Emin-Worry and DeAnthony Bell are both on the field at the same time. But DeAnthony Bell is playing your nickel, and Nick Emin-Worry is playing your backer, your weak side backer. And again, now you're creating issues for a defense, because the one thing you can do with Nick is you can blitz him, but you can spot drop him, and you can do the same thing with DeAnthony Bell. But DeAnthony Bell is now playing out in that slot corner role and that nickel, but Nick's lined up in the box. It makes things a little bit more difficult. Now, do I have to guess trend-wise, because it's not something they've probably seen a lot of Seattle do, because Nick hasn't been playing. So now in that game, is my in-game adjustment to go to more of a heavy personnel when they try and do that? Well, now I've got to guess when they're doing that and hope I hit on it in a game, rather than, hey, I've got all this analytical data showing when they're doing it.
I think another thing that's really worth pointing out at this point is, we talked a lot in training camp. People like to talk about depth and acquisitions and going after this guy or that guy and hypotheticals. And when we talked a lot during camp about, should they sign Jadeveon Clowney? Should they go for Trey Hendrickson? Should they try and make a bigger move for Micah Parsons? And I got a lot of pushback on conversations like that. We got it with the corner group too. I know when we signed Shaq Griffin, like, why do we need him? We don't need another corner. That's a waste of a roster spot. Well, this is why, because injuries happen. And it's just unfortunate that it's happened at some key spots. I guess you could argue that every spot is key. I'm just, knock on wood, but I've been saying since week 1 that I don't think the interior defensive line depth is good enough. I think those guys are playing way too many snaps. I think Leonard Williams and Jaron Reed are out there way more than you want them to. And if one of those guys happens to go down, I think they're in a world of hurt, because then the run defense starts to suffer. This is where those things come in. Do you expect to, I know you want to, because we've talked and I do too. Do you think they'll give Jared Ivey some snaps? Because it seems like he's a guy that could help on the inside and the outside.
I think there's a chance. I think it's depending on what they think Mike Morris can do. And maybe they have a better plan this week for Mike Morris's usage, just because obviously Hall's out. It's really interesting to me, Dan, because you talk about the depth. I think there's a chance for Jared Ivey to obviously get more reps right now with Hall being out for sure. The thing I will say is, when I look at what they needed to do, everyone talked about pass rusher, Trey Hendrickson, Micah Parsons, Jadeveon Clowney. I think I am way more in the camp now. They need to go get a guy, because the thing that was kind of holding me back from being like, yeah, give up all the capital for, Micah Parsons or, whatnot was, okay, I like Sam. What are we going to see from Sam Darnold? Like, are we going to see the quarterback that we are seeing right now, which I didn't even think we were going to see. I thought we'd see a good quarterback. I didn't think we'd see an elite level. Like we're talking production wise and what he's doing on the field. We're talking like guy that's top 7 right now in the NFL. Now that you're seeing that is something that over the first 5 games has been sustainable, and you're hearing guys like Daniel Jeremiah and other, well-respected analysts going, yeah, no, this isn't like he's a flash in the pan. Like this is like now 25, 22 of 25 games or 23 of 25 games of a sample size. This isn't it's 5 games only. Like this is what Sam is now. Yeah, he had the 2 bad games last year. Okay, cool. Every quarterback has bad games. I'm more in the camp now of like, hey, you know what? Go give the Raiders a call and see what Max Crosby's doing. I know it sounds crazy, but we've seen crazier things done by John Schneider with Jamal Adams and other guys he's made deals for. Like, give the Bengals a call about Trey Hendrickson. Like, go get somebody, because you can't sit here at the end of the day and go, yeah, we were this close to winning the division because we didn't have that pass rusher. Yeah. That, to me, is the change here. This defense needs a pass rusher, because I like Hall. Still not getting sacks. He's creating pressure, which is great, and I think he's developing and he's doing well. You're banking on Chenna right now being your sack producer, and Leo, who teams are aware of what Big Cat can do, and Byron Murphy. Like, you notice how they've kind of got quiet on that, sack sheet in the last couple of weeks, and now it's Chenna stepping up, who's come back. But if you're banking on Chenna being your sack guy as the main guy, that's a problem, and that's why I'm in that camp of go get somebody.
You came up with an interesting name, and I don't want to steal your thunder from a show that I know you've yet to do, but hey, we'll promote it. The Saints have made it known, or at least they've made it known through back channels, and it's been reported that they are open for business, and that they might be finally willing to do a full rebuild and get out of cap hell and trade some assets, offload some money, get some draft picks, or maybe some young players in return. And you had a really interesting Saints possibility as a potential target. And we talked about it, looked at the contractual implications and everything of that the other day, and it makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, Carl Granderson is someone I think could be, if Seattle can't swing for the fences on a Max Crosby, or they can't get in the bidding war really for Trey Hendrickson, Carl Granderson's really interesting to me, I should say, because you wouldn't have to give up a lot. We're talking a guy, maybe a mid-round pick to get him out of there. He has production. Like, he already got 4.5 sacks this year. The only game he didn't get a sack, ironically, was against Seattle. Yeah. But can play inside, can play outside, is a pass rusher. I think he has the ability, if you add him to this rotation, he's a guy that fits what Mike Macdonald wants to do defensively with his edges, and a guy you're not going to have to break the bank for, but will have an impact in the pass rushing game and allows you to get Hall back and allows you to add to this group. He's the guy that I'm most interested in contractually. Like, I think he doesn't hurt you long-term in a lot of ways. And the one thing that's key with Seattle, and like what you've seen them do over the last few years, is they like to get a guy in the building and they like to see what he's going to do, especially some of the older guys like Leo. Get him in the building. How does it work? Okay, great. It works great. Here's your contract extension. If you go after a guy like Granderson, he's got 1 year left on his deal, so you're not really forced to redo anything. If it works, great. You can extend it and change that cap hit in 2026. But it's the same thing with Max Crosby. Like, he just signed his new deal, and I believe Rob Staten did a really good show on it that I watched the other day, or this morning, I should say. He breaks it down. Yeah, and the way that contract is set up, that is hey, if things aren't going well, we can get you out of here, and it's not going to kill us, and it's not going to kill the team trying to get you, which means we might be able to get more capital out of that deal because it's such a friendly deal for the other team to pick up. And there you go. Like, I would be interested in a player with that skill set, right? Like, we're looking at a guy sack wise that
very consistent. He kind of fits the Seahawks model. He was an undrafted free agent. Right. Only you can see it. Only played. He was played in 8 games as a rookie and then kind of worked his way up. He's been available. He's only missed 1 game due to injury in his career. You see the consistency, right? With the sacks, you go 5, 3, 5.5, 8.5, 5.5, 4.5 so far this year. So he's obviously off to a much better start. And then look at the contract. And as you said, his cap hit for the rest of this year is $6.5 million. That's easily. Now, there's a huge dead cap the Saints would actually lose money by releasing him, but you can do some things there, right? The Seahawks could somehow, there's ways to offset that and make that work. And then his cap hits the next 2 years are $18 million. But as you said, that is easily the way it's structured, a lot of base salary that's not guaranteed. So there's a lot, you can convert some of that to bonus or whatever. There's a lot of easy triggers in that contract for a guy that's 29 years old. He's got a couple of void years on too, but he's under contract through 2027. So you'd have to give up some draft capital, but we're already starting to hear, and I know it's way early and things could change. We're already starting to hear, and Rob's one of the guys at the forefront of this narrative. Next year's draft class may not be that great. And so when you start to look at that, like for a team like the Saints, picks are gold, no matter if it's a good draft year or not. They need to get younger, but maybe you're more willing to give up a day 2 pick, or maybe you're more willing to even give up your first for the right guy, because it's not going to get you the quality of player that a first is going to get you in a good year.
And that's the thing I think you got to look at with the Seattle team. We're not talking about an old roster. We're not talking about a roster that, is aging. We're talking about an ascending roster age-wise, even in its own right. Cooper Kupp's one of the oldest guys on the team. So your O-line is all under 30. Your quarterback right now, Sam Darnold, is 27 turning 28. He's still 2 years from 30. Your running backs are young. The receiving core is young. The tight end group is young. Like, we're not talking about this team that's like, hey, like the Mike Holmgren teams where we saw guys like, hey, Bobby Ingram's in his 30s and, Matt Hasselbeck's in his 30s. But yeah, that changes your look at things, right? With Seattle in the draft this year, it's like, okay, yes, we need to look at right guard potentially as an upgrade. One of our biggest needs is an edge rusher. Well, can I go an established guy that in his mid to late 20s that's going to come in and be more impactful than a guy that I'm going to have to draft, see where his development's at, and go from there? That's kind of where I look at Seattle and I go, like, they're drafting for depth pieces in some respects in this draft. Like, you have a lot of things already established on your roster that you're going to keep around. You're drafting for more depth pieces. So if you're a team that's in a divisional race, which they are, and you're one of the better teams potentially in the NFL, you see them in the power rankings now being in the top 10, go get that piece to put you over the top. Don't just kind of wait and hope. And so, like, for me, like, Granderson seems like a more logical choice. I think, though, they need to start swinging high and go for the home run hit, try and get Max Crosby, try and get, a Trey Hendrickson, a guy that's going to be actually that, impact player. You can't, then drop it down and try and get someone that's still going to come in and be impactful.
Rampancy asks, I'm not trying to divide creators, but can anyone answer me how Rob Staten is getting that Max Crosby would only be a $10 million dead cap hit for the Raiders over the next 2 years? Doesn't add up. It's how they structure the contract. Here is what it looks like for a trade on over the cap. And you can see it very clearly in 2025. The Raiders would only take a $10 million dead cap hit. They would save $28 million, a $5 million dead cap hit next year, and they would save $31 million. And then you see, it's zero dead cap after that. It's one of the reasons why when they announce these contracts that are done, you can't just take the first number and go, oh, geez, we're going to be in cap hell for years, because that's the agent number. That's the number that the player feels good about. But usually when contracts are done this way, and this is why, a lot of people out there, especially Raiders fans, obviously, and I got into some of these conversations today, when you even start to talk about the possibility of trading for a guy like Max Crosby, their initial reaction is he's a Raider for life. No way they let him get out of the building. Well, it takes two to tango. And Max Crosby agreed to this deal, which doesn't give him a lot of job security, right? He did. No, he probably did that for a reason, to give himself some flexibility. He wants to win. He is wired to win. He desperately wants to be on a winner. And if he feels like this team is now going to have to start over again, because I don't even know if Pete's going to make it the rest of the year there, then he's not that. Time flies, man. He's 28 years old already. I feel like he was just in the draft, and he was a guy that I wanted so badly. And I thought the Raiders were brilliant for taking him when they did. I thought I discovered a sleeper that no one else knew about, watching blurry tape from Eastern Michigan. He signed this deal knowing that there was flexibility, so it would be easy to trade him. Now, because of that, It's going to cost you more too. And I've seen some hypothetical trades out there that don't include 2 first picks. And I think that's dead in the water right there. I think he costs you 2 firsts and then some.
He costs you, in my opinion, if you're going to trade for Max Crosby, this is kind of what the capital I think the Raiders are going to look at, because I think for the Raiders, because this season has gone off the rails so hard, and I was listening to Daniel Jeremiah on 710, Mike Salk and Brock Hewer do that segment with him in their show, and they were asking, like, what happened to the Raiders? And he goes, I think the Raiders misjudged where they were. They should have done a rebuild, and instead they tried to do this add veterans, win now, sneak into the playoffs thing.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to look at this and they're going to go, okay, if we can get a 2026 first, a 2027 first, a third round, and a player, they are going to do that. That is what I think that conversation starts at. It's not going to be a first and a third, and that's it for Max Crosby. No, you're talking about one of the premier, top of the line edge rushers in the NFL. And to be honest, he's not even a pure pass rusher. Like, he is a phenomenal pass rusher. Do not get me wrong, but this guy can play the run, set the edge, do some things some other guys can't do, and you're still getting him under 30. Yeah. So if you're going to do that, I'm thinking, like, for me, what I think this trade probably looks like I said, first in 2026, first in 2027, your 2026 third round pick, and Boy Mafe is probably what is something that would get that done, because Pete knows Boye. He drafted Boye Mafe, and he probably looks at it. If he's there, or if not, you're still getting a young pass rusher back. You're getting another piece that you can play this year back, but you're getting this massive draft capital haul. Now, whether or not they continue to sign Boy Mafe for another couple of years, who knows? Or maybe it's Reek Woolen. Everyone talks about Reek. I feel like it's one of those 2 players plus the 2 first and the third if you're going to try and start that conversation with the Raiders.
Just to be devil's advocate here and push back a little bit, and I did see FanDuel put out their hypothetical trade today, and it was just what you're talking. It was only one for a first, a third, and Reek. And I'm like, okay, if a guy like Reek or Boye is going to be involved in that deal, I think that would only work if the Raiders get a commitment from one of those players to sign an extension. Otherwise, it makes no sense. But something that is interesting to me is as much as I love seeing him healthy and out there playing, if you're going to get a guy like Max Crosby, is the Raiders are saving a bunch of money in this hypothetical deal. Like, I could see if Pete might have a chance to stick around in this thing, I could see Chenna being part of that deal, because he needs culture setters and he needs guys that are familiar with what he's done. And I think Chenna is a classic example of a guy that Pete would want in his program, but just, tossing those ideas around. It's
I think it's, and I see some people in the comments, Dogzilla, saying 2 firsts seem crazy. Not for that player. It's not for Max Crosby and the production you're getting. That is almost a baseline in this conversation, because you got to think of it this way. It would be different if it's 2 bottom feeder teams, trading, or we're talking about high first round picks. Seattle's probably going to be picking in the 20s. So 2 of those, that's like, okay, we're talking really high second round picks in some drafts. Like this year's draft not being that good. Like, that's
even in good years in the 20s, you're usually not getting a first round graded player.
Correct.
And so, with what they're saying about this, and the other answer I would have to that is always, money is always a big part of the equation. Yep. I know Micah is 2 years younger, but the Packers gave up 2 firsts and more, and a good player and another pick, and knowing they were going to have to sign him to a 6-figure deal. It's Max is, because the contract is so friendly to the team acquiring him, it's going to cost you more. He's any conversation with the Raiders to even keep them from slamming the phone down. That's assuming they have actual physical phones in there. I don't know if they do or not. Or this is 2 firsts. It starts there or it's over.
Agreed. And that's where, for me, like, when I look at, if I even go and look at, potentially, like, you look at Micah's stats. Okay. So Micah's, like you said, 2 years younger, his sacks have been 13, 14, 12, and he's got 2.5 this year. If I pull up Max Crosby's stats and I look at what he's done in the same time frame, stat-wise, Max Crosby has been sacks 10, 7, 8, 12, 14, 7, and 2. Mm-hmm. But Max Crosby also has barely missed any time, and at the same time, his TFLs are higher and his total tackle numbers are higher.
in quarterback hits. You go 30, in the last 5 years, 30, 35, 31, 26. Like he's a monster, dude. He forces fumbles. He's just an absolute monster. He's exactly the kind of guy that you'd be willing to give up 2 first-round picks for, especially because of what you said, just the context of everything, right? Seahawks are in really good cap position moving forward. They've got a quarterback on a really, reasonable deal. They'll be drafting in the 20s. Those picks aren't as valuable. I think it would make all the sense in the world. Now, maybe the Raiders are going to take that stance of never, ever, 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 ever. We're building around this guy. But at some point, when you're facing yet another rebuild, sometimes you have to look big picture and you have to look farther ahead. And picks, they need so much help. That roster is so bad at almost every single level. And so you're just wasting that asset because you're not going to win with them for the next 2 years.
And I think that's what's really interesting about this. If you look at Myles Garrett and you look at Max Crosby and the contracts, they both signed him this offseason, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or Myles signed his, was it last year or was it this offseason? I'm trying to remember.
Garrett? Just this last offseason, yeah.
Yeah.
He demanded a trade.
So if you look at Myles Garrett's one, he isn't going anywhere. It is a $68 million dead cap hit if the Browns want to move Myles Garrett.
Right.
Not $15 million. And spread out over 2 seasons. So the 10 and the 5. That to me signals way more about where the Raiders' mindset is of, you know what? If we get the right compensation, we're more willing to move Max Crosby than most.
And as I was saying earlier, it signals how much the player wants to be there.
Yeah,
he signed that deal knowing they can't trade me now, right? So that's a huge part of it. And we know they asked about him in the offseason. The answer was no then, but everybody's feeling good in the offseason. Everybody thinks they can win. I get this question a lot. Rampancy says, I'm wondering what Pooh Paul has to offer. John McGrath also asked, with the lack of depth at linebacker, why not activate Pooh Paul? Can he play the will linebacker position? Yeah, that's his spot. He's a cover guy. He's a run and he's a sideline to sideline guy. And here's the simple answer to that is we don't know. First of all, he dropped to the 5th round for a reason. Like, we don't know how he looks in practice on the practice squad. We don't know how well he's picking up this scheme that Mike Macdonald has admitted is really complex. And he had to dumb it down last year for these guys to get it. We don't know those things. And so, you can just say, hey, this guy, really like this guy coming out of college. He could be struggling in practice. Nobody's tried to poach him off the practice squad. Now, we also don't know. We're not privy to whether maybe he's one of the guys every Tuesday that they protect. We don't know that either. I wish we did. I wish we knew those things.
That'd be fun to know that actually who it is.
Yeah.
My thought is this, Dan, with Pooh Paul, and this is something I've been thinking about the last few weeks is if Tyrese Knight and Drake Thomas don't start playing better, because I thought they both played really badly in this last game. And I don't know what's going on with Tyrese Knight. I think there's something still up with him health-wise or whatnot. Yeah, he's just not the same player he was.
He's not. Doesn't have the juice that he did last year.
I think there is a chance that after the bye week, if things don't get better between now and the Texans game, that after that bye week, I think that's when you see Pooh Paul get activated because that'll give him half of the season. And what happened last year with our linebackers? They finally felt comfortable with Knight after week 8.
But here's my retort to that is if they, first of all, in a just kind of an overall view, if they feel like there's a player on there that they have in the building right now that can make him better, they're going to play him. This isn't, there was a time during Pete's tenure here where always compete kind of got swept by the wayside, and he didn't stick to that. And guys were scholarshiped in, and they couldn't be unseated from their position, even though there were guys that we thought could maybe give them a little different look. That doesn't happen now. We've already seen some of those moves with Macdonald. If he feels like there's a guy in the building that can help them win games at the weak side linebacker position, they'll play him. And B, that guy the next man up is probably Patrick O'Connell. I mean, everyone forgets about him, but yet again, he played really well in the preseason. He looked really good in camp, and Macdonald loves him and raves about him. And so everybody wants to go to Pooh Paul because he's kind of the new shiny toy or whatever. And everyone's familiar with him because he got some buzz in the draft. But if they're going to make a change at weak side linebacker, I think O'Connell's the next guy up.
Yes. It's interesting though. My thing with O'Connell is I think you're activating him. It will be for more of a special teams role. I think that's probably why you haven't seen his activation yet. Paul may not be the special teams guy. I think he gives you more as an actual true linebacker than Patrick O'Connell just because of his athleticism. I think his reason, like, they don't go and get that guy unless, and especially I think he is probably one of they are protecting. I don't think you go get that guy from your divisional opponent and keep him this long unless you actually see a long-term plan for him in some aspect with that defense, right? Because you think of how often they've been rotating guys and dropping guys and bringing guys back on the 70-man count. He has never been one of those individuals. Right. And if he's a guy that you're not really trusting, and neither is O'Connell, so don't get me wrong on this, but if you're not willing to, if you're not willing to put him out there,
game day elevations, right? That would be the first hint.
But on another note, Dan, they just released the injury report. I don't know if you've seen that yet.
No, I've been waiting for it. Okay, here it is. Boom, right there. Brady just dropped it. So there's some good news.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, here are the guys fully participating today. Nick Emenwari, he was limited yesterday. He's good to go. That was a scary moment on Sunday when he went down again. It looked like ankle again. Ernest Jones is up to limited participation. I didn't think that shoulder was going to be anything. DeMarcus Lawrence, full participation in practice. To your point earlier, that is huge. Getting DeMarcus Lawrence back would be huge because now you're talking Lawrence, Mafe, and Nwosu. That's a solid rotation. Ivy's probably active on game day. And then Jaron Reed also, who didn't practice yesterday, but that was just a veteran rest day. Full participation. Brady Russell, full participation. Still no practice for Devin Witherspoon. No practice for Julian Love. That's obviously concerning. But Macdonald did say those were probably going to go right up until the end of the week. But I'm with you, man. If Julian Love can play, if he's 80, 90%, but he feels good about going, they don't think it's something that would aggravate. It's a hamstring, right?
Yeah.
It's a hamstring. Then you play him because even in 80% Julian Love, he's quarterback. Your defense needs to be out there. Devin Witherspoon, and I think you might have touched on this a little bit earlier. I want to make sure he's 100% healthy. I want to make sure that knee is 100%, even if it takes until after the bye week, because we've seen as long as Reek can go, and he was limited today, but he's got to, still get through the protocol.
There's video of him running around today, which is a good sign. They've got him running, which is a good sign.
He's going to play. Then I'm cool. Let Darian Kendrick play the slot again. I'm probably going to elevate Shaq this week. So I like that over Pritchett, I feel much, much better already about this game because Tank's ready to go.
That's the big one for me, is having Tank there, because that changes your ability to do certain things. I think Tank can still pass rush well enough that he's going to affect a pocket, and we've seen it. I know his numbers there on PFF haven't shown that, but I think that's definitely something that's there. I wanted to touch on something that's in your chat here, Dan, and it's the Trey Hendrickson trade compensation.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Kevin, I think
what would it take?
Kevin's been asking about it for a little bit, so I think we can talk. I think with Trey, it's nowhere near the draft capital. I think it's more of a player that can help them and is young. And I think it's probably a second round pick potentially now. That is where that contract, that discussion starts with. I think it would be third or a second, and probably, Boy Mafe. Like, they're going to want an edge going back the other way to replace Trey. And again, it would be hey, we're going to have you agree. Like, I will put it this way. Derek Hall is not going to be a part of a trade package unless you're getting Max Crosby. And I even think that's a stretch for them. I think they're more willing to part with Boye Mafe than they are Derek Hall.
Well, and what complicates the Trey Hendrickson situation is he going to be willing to sign an extension as part of any trade? I don't know that he is. At his age, he knows he only has one deal left. He probably wants to hit the market. And so now you're talking about a rental, right? And maybe a rental that, just like with Leonard Williams, that like you hope that once you get in the building, you can sign him long-term. But I don't know that makes sense for the Seahawks. And so to me, it all depends on his market. And if there's a trade out there where, we're only committed to having him for the rest of the year, and then I'm fine letting him walk, for a guy that could have that kind of impact, a lot of this depends on, like John McGrath said earlier, these next 2 games didn't look like much on the schedule at the beginning of the year, but they're kind of must wins now. If they win the next 2 to go to 5-2 going into the bye, I'd give up a 3rd round pick for Trey Hendrickson with no guarantee of having him beyond this year. I think that's value for a guy that could help you get to the playoffs, potentially still push the Niners for this division title. I'm not counting the Rams out yet either, but actually make an impact in the playoffs and put a team together that's really rolling at the end of the year. I would do that.
I would also do it because you got to think that the 49ers, and this is why I'm saying the edge thing.
Yep.
The 49ers are going to be in the edge market, especially if they win and beat the Bucs and they're starting to kind of get on that roll like you were talking about, Dan. They are going to be in the market for an edge player to rent for this year. And Trey Hendrickson is probably number 1 on the top of that list for them as a guy that they will go and rent.
If you're John Schneider and he's as connected in this league as anyone,
mm-hmm.
and the Bengals are playing us off, the 49ers, right? And they know that the Niners are offering a 3rd. Do you offer a 2nd, or do you go like, okay, we'll give you a little kicker, we'll give you a conditional 6th or a 2026 4th that could upgrade, something like that? Like, how far do you go?
I think that's probably, you go with a 2nd and you give a conditional and you go from there and see. I also think, to be honest, I really believe that when they tried to trade Geno and tried to get Crosby back, I think Crosby is a guy that John Schneider has on his board. I'm not necessarily, because we've heard this in the past with John. He will try for something and then he'll come back around to it. They tried for Ernest Jones when he was with the Rams and then came back around to it. And they've done it before with other guys that they've eventually traded for. They kept, go back to the Marshawn Lynch story. They wanted Marshawn early in the year and they kept calling and they kept calling. And finally they got Buffalo to actually listen and eventually the trade went through. I think Seattle probably is really, there's a connection there. But I will say this. I think there's a high chance in the next week or 2 that the 49ers make a trade for an edge, and they may get Trey Hendrickson before we do. I think it's going to depend what happens in this Tennessee game for the Raiders. If the Raiders lose, if they split their next 2 games or they lose both of them, the Raiders will become sellers at the deadline and they will go full rebuild mode. And that's where you'll see Max Crosby's market drive.
And they should, the Commanders showed, and it was all based on analytics at the time 2 years ago when they traded Chase Young and Jonathan Allen. Like they got rid of all their best pass rushers, or Josh Sweat and Chase Young. They traded the same year, and then they moved on from Jonathan Allen the next year. Like, the assets are more important if you're not in a window where you can win over the next couple of years. John's asked about this before, but any chance Riley Mills will be activated before the bye week? I assume by activated you mean that the window opens.
Yeah.
Still have not heard any reports of him even doing. The last week got an update, I think it was 2 weeks ago, from Macdonald, and he still wasn't doing lateral movement stuff. He was running straight ahead, but not laterally. I really think that they are so high on Riley Mills that they are not in any way, shape, or form going to push him. I think they have a pretty good plan for him. I think it's similar to the plan we saw with Nwosu, where maybe Uchenna could have played week 1 and was, remember, Macdonald kept saying he's working hard. He's ahead. We have to put the brakes on him. Like, he's pushing harder than we want him to right now. They just wanted to make sure when he is ready, he's 100%. And we might not see Riley Mills at all this year, because if there's any question on their part that he's not fully ready to go, then I don't think they're going to push it, because I think he's a big part of their future plans. But I think the key for this will be, I don't think we hear anything before the bye week. That's just gut feeling and just kind of just based on stuff that I've heard and seen. But I think that would be one of the biggest questions that I want asked after the bye week is, okay, what does the clock look like for Riley Mills? And also, and I don't know if anyone asked about it today, what the hell is going on with Christian Haynes? Like, it is a huge mystery. He's been eligible now to come off injured reserve for the last 2 weeks and haven't heard a thing. It was a pec injury that he practiced through. Like, are they reshaping his body quietly in the background? Are they adding 10 pounds to him and putting him through an Ironman competition to get him stronger? I don't know what's going on with that. That's weird to me.
I think they're using the IR right now for Christian Haynes as a extra practice squad spot. Even though he can't practice, you're using it as a plus right now for you to keep some of your other guys. Like they just moved Shane Lemieux to practice squad IR to bring on Hook, right?
Right.
I think that's what they're doing. Is like, okay, if Cable Dew goes down and Richmond goes down and Haynes is good, we can now activate him and he goes. And I think if you see him get activated, he will dress that week. It won't be like, oh, he's activated and he's got to wait this 2-week window. It'll be like he's activated and he is good to go kind of a thing.
Meanwhile, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Jaguars injury report. Remember, coming off a short week, right?
Yep.
De'Ami Brown limited, Ezra Cleveland guard limited. Robert Hainsey, that was the big injury during the game. They're really, really good center. He did not practice again today. Doesn't sound like he's going to be ready to go, which means Jonah Monheim, the rookie out of USC, who I got a good look at during Senior Bowl week, would be the starter there. So that could really play a role. And then Trayvon Walker trying to work his way back from wrist injury. Doesn't look like he's on track to play either. Former number 1 pick. He's limited. He was limited the last 2 days, so maybe he will be able to go with probably a big old club on that hand. This is probably a good one to end on, talking about Christian Haynes, because it'll allow me to tease a show that I'm going to do tomorrow and release in the morning tomorrow before I take the weekend off for my birthday. And the title of that show is called Anthony Brad Isn't as Bad as You Think He Is. So just a little something for y'all to look forward to. I'm sure that's going to elicit some strong responses.
Yeah, I think Anthony Bradford, every offensive line isn't perfect. And I think his Cardinals game, where you saw all those video highlights come out of, his back was extremely bothersome for him in that game. I thought,
he didn't move right.
And I thought he played fine in this game. The O-line got a number 5 ranking this week on 33rd team. They gave up no sacks. I thought Bradford moved guys in the run game well. He did some good stuff in the past. And every guy's going to have a bad rep. Even Hall of Fame level players had bad reps. The thing is, I don't see the penalties. We haven't heard Anthony Bradford called for a bunch of penalties this year, which was a big issue in the past. He is serviceable enough, I think, until they find another upgrade. And you know what? I'll be honest, Dan.
Yeah.
They may never find an amazing right guard. It may be really good left tackle in Charles Cross, really good left guard in Gray Zabel. Maybe they get a bit of an upgrade. Sundell, I think, is starting to get more of his feet underneath him as a center, and a really good right tackle and a serviceable right guard. That may be Seattle's line for the next 5-6 years.
Well, and I think we might, even if Bradford stays healthy all year and gets better as the year goes along, I think we might be having a conversation next year during training camp of Bryce Cable Dew pushing him over there. I know they really like him. They've had him active. They've had him out there in some, he and Mason Richmond in some heavy packages and stuff. And that's pretty intriguing to me. This is an interesting point too. And this is one of the reasons I want him off the injured reserve list is, there might be a team out there, as many teams in the NFL that need help on the offensive line right now, that maybe Christian Haynes would carry a little bit of trade value. If he can get healthy. Thank you so much for the kind words. Really, really appreciate that. And John, as always, good to see you. So there's that. And then check out the NFC West mixtape. Rob Guerrero and I did that again today. I have such a good time doing that show with him. And also, was it Stuart Smalley? It was Stuart Smalley. Remember him on the Saturday Night Live days back in the day? At the end of every show, he'd go, I think that was my best show ever. I think this was my best show. I think that was our best show on the NFC West mixtape. So check that out. What do you got coming up on the Hawks Eye?
So today I'm popping over onto the Hawks Nest with Brandon to kind of do a color commentary live broadcast of the Thursday night game. So guys, pop over there if you're a member of Brandon's channel over there. And then Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Pacific time, me and Brandon Kane are going to be doing the live preview show for the Jags game. So come bring your comments from myself, for Brandon. Live post-game show Sunday night. Seahawks Aftermath, Michael Thompson on Monday. And that's kind of the next couple of days coming up here for what's going on the Hawks Eye.
That'll be half of the Seahawks syndicate in action. there. And then just a couple weeks from now, we'll be reconvening for that to recap the first half of the season. So John McGrath, this is a good one to end on here, says still confident on 13-4 Island. Well, that will require a winning streak. That needs to start this week in Jacksonville. Just another programming reminder, because it is my birthday on Sunday, and it's a big one. It's a big, giant, fat, round number. That's all I'm going to say about it. I will not be doing a live, immediate, rapid reaction post-game show. I'm just going to enjoy the game and hopefully also be enjoying game one of the ALCS if the Mariners finish the Tigers off tomorrow. And so look for a show on Monday. I'll do more of a comprehensive recap on the game, and then Mike Macdonald's coach's show Monday morning and all of that stuff then. So until then, I'm Dan. That's Bryce. Thanks for popping in. Mystery surprise guest. It's always fun when that happens. Forever and always, go Hawks. Thanks for watching, everybody.